everyone, it's nostalgia time once again, and after an amazing upgrade saga through Vista 7 and 8, basically the client versions of those two OSs, we now do what we did with the client version of XP. We're going to actually be doing an install race of various server builds of Windows Server 2003. However, here they're known as Whistler server. So we got a few builds here. In fact, these actually stretch through beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, essentially all three betas. However, actually only half of beta 3 is included here. So we got build 2267, 2296, 2410, 2430, 2433, 2455, 2467, 2465, and 2493. And as we can see right off the bat, pretty much all of them mention Windows Whistler, except for 2493, where the name was actually changed to Windows XP. It wouldn't be that way in the final release. So, just like the client counterpart, we're going to be seeing references to Windows 2000 throughout. Now, because this is Server 2003, the classic theme will be the theme we will see the whole entire time throughout the entire development cycle. So as we go through the development here of Server 2003, we will be seeing just the classic theme the whole entire time. So there really won't be too many changes, well, UI-wise, except for things that are on the desktop from what I've seen. So they're all finishing the first portion of the setup now. And as we can see in build 2433 and even 2430, we can see that the Windows 2000 style boot screen is still present. However, it replaces all mentions of Windows 2000 to now say Microsoft Codename Whistler Server Family. But then looking at 2455, we are going to be getting a much different boot screen. As we can see, that is the exact same boot screen that we saw during the pre-Luna builds of the client version of Whistler. The new Windows flag design with the logo colors going across the screen. And in fact, everybody, all the other builds are just wrapping up now. And then we can see 2493, the boot screen has actually been updated to sort of the final design, except it just reads Windows. But you would only see it when booting into the next portion of the setup if you're upgrading to Windows XP. So, looking at the install screens, we can see that they're all just like the client counterparts. The steps on the left side, the codename Whistler tag at the top, the clouds, the welcome screen design, And we can see on 2493, the install screen is just like the final release of XP. And on 2455, we get the same screen. However, again, we have a different Windows flag. However, of course, leading up to 2493, we would of course still see multiple areas where the old Windows flag would still be present. And this will actually be a similar case too for build 2465 and 2467 as their respective out-of-box experiences now load. It's actually 2467 where we get our first glimpse of the final install screen for the client release of XP. However, since we are doing Server 2003, the text blurbs now mention the features for Windows Server, but this would not be the install screen we would see in the final release. It would be in a much different gradient. So as I'm going through the out-of-boxes here, you can see that build 2433 was actually the last build that features the old Windows flag on these particular screens before they were dropped entirely. And then on 2267, that's the only build in this collection that you can see that still uses the Windows Millennium setup graphics and the Windows 2000 style setup wizard. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a winner. Build 2493 is the first to complete. And as you can see, it mentions Windows XP Advanced Server in the build string on the bottom right. And we can see that here the banner has actually been changed to now say Microsoft Codename Whistler Advanced Server. This actually would not be the final banner that would be used in the final release of Server 2003. And we can see that this build is ready to go. We can just go ahead and log in like so. But as we can see here on the desktop, we have my documents, computer, my network places, and Internet Explorer on the desktop by default. And of course, we don't have that two-column start menu. We have the classic start menu, and I believe it's locked that way by default. And now it still says Codename Whistler Advanced Server. But otherwise, we just get some Windows XP basic stuff, and that's really it. So here's the configure your server wizard, which I believe is intended to be a replacement for a new and improved way to set up the server. So of course this is where you go to set your server up. There's a little tutorial on the start button. Now of course we don't have any sound drivers, but that's okay. And I see Windows Media Player is actually on here too. And I don't think it would be on here for the final release, but it's for the accessories component. But I mean, it'll try to, but it doesn't say that there's no hardware. So, no audio drivers, so we cannot run. So we can't really do that kind of stuff. The Windows catalog is on here too, which I don't think it would be in the final release. And everything here has pretty much been forced to the classic style. And even if we were to go into taskbar properties, we would see, of course, the XP. But then there actually is the two-column start menu in this build. However, it was set to the classic one by default. So we can enable the two-column start menu, and I believe it would be this way in the final build. Except it would be slimmed down. So we'll go ahead and re-enable the classic start menu. But otherwise, that's really all there is to see here. However, you can see the background does fade out. Now, this shutdown event tracker here, I believe, is exclusive to the server versions of Windows and would not be seen in a consumer build by default, except with some tweaks where it asks you to give a reason why you want to shut the computer down or restart. And then it does give us the option to stand by, but we can do log off. It doesn't ask for a reason. It's only when you shut down or restart. So we'll write nothing to see here in this build. Now we wait for the others to finish their installation. And then we can press enter. It'll save what we had just wrote, and then it'll shut off, and then it'll shut down. Now this is actually the first build that actually includes the final XP sounds, the sounds we would hear in the final release of both Windows XP and of course the final build of Server 2003. So we'll just wait now for it to shut down, and then there it goes. So that's the winning build there. We still got a few more to go, and in fact 2296 and 2410 are both not even getting far at all. There appears to have hanged at starting Windows Whistler. I'm not sure if it's because there's corrupted files on those disks or something. I don't know what the reason is, but there isn't really going to be too many differences and changes in this build anyway, so in those builds anyway. So now we'll just wait for the rest of them to finish, and then we will look at those. So you can see that the other builds are done. This one I believe is actually still trying to boot, but otherwise everything else is pretty much complete. So let's start with the login screen on build 2430 and 2433. You can see that 2430 comes in the data center variant, while 2433 comes in the advanced server edition. But just like any old server build, we gotta press Control-Alt-Delete to log in. It's in 16 color by default here because it's virtualization, so I'm not surprised. But then that's what the lock screen, screensaver, whatever, looks like. And see it says Microsoft codename Windows Server, Whistler Server, with the old Windows flag. But then when we take it out of screensaver, we'll see the new Windows flag. It now just says codename Whistler Server. It doesn't say like what edition it is, but on the build string it mentions XP server. So Microsoft was probably originally going to use the XP name for the server version, the next server release. However, this was actually when... Now, this was actually using an old release structure that Microsoft did back in the day, where they actually did NT4 server. So they had NT4 workstation and then NT4 server. And then this is what they did with Windows 2000. They did Windows 2000 server and 2000 professional. But either way, all the same thing. And I just saw one of the builds play a startup sound. And here's all the configure your server wizards with the comments. These actually would be redesigned in the final build. And as we can see here, you can see that the UI is pretty much close to being final. As on these two builds, 2430 and 2433, we can see that we still have the Windows 2000 icons. And then 2465 and 67, we can see that we have the final XP icons, except for the recycle bin. I think the recycle bin would look this way in 16 colors in the final release of XP. I believe that is, if I remember correctly. But then we still have the old Windows Update banner. And then opening up the start menus on all four, we can see that 2467 was the first build to include the new Windows flag in the Windows Update web application. And this actually would be ported over to Windows 2000 as well for either Service Pack 3 or Service Pack 4. I'm guessing Service Pack 3 most likely. Because Windows 2000, remember, had 4 service packs and NT4 had 6. Then XP had 3, Vista had 2, and 7 had only 1, and then that was it. There were no more service packs after that. So that's a help and support center for XP server. Now 2467 was actually the first build to include the out-of-box experience music that would be used in the final release of the client version of XP. And we will find it in the out-of-box folder. But we can still see there are still some leftover Windows 2000 icons. Here's the title.wma file that makes its debut in this build. And again, we wouldn't be able to hear it. It goes unused here because there is no out-of-box experience in Windows Server, in any server version for that matter. I'll open up the system properties on... Oh my god, it's actually playing Windows welcome music. Look at that refresh rate on the... Not appearance settings. We're probably locked into 16 colors because we really don't have any proper display drivers. 4-bit. If we even change it to 800 by 600. Oh, looks like that's as far as it'll let us go. Okay. All right. Well, that's really all there is to see in these builds. Let's log in here. But just before we shut before we shut these down, what do you want the computer to do? I want it to shut down, not restart. Shut down. And I can see here the background's faded out. I'll just put the letter D there. And yep, that animation there is what we would see in some of the later Whistler builds. All right, let's go ahead and shut this guy down. I'll just put the letter W. All right, so here's 2455. So we can see same as before. Again, nothing too special, just the classic theme in like 4-bit color, but otherwise nothing else too exciting to report except that final shutdown icon came in 2465. But here we have the monitor. I believe that would be the case too in Windows 2000. And then as soon as the shutdown dialog box comes up, same as before, except we have the new animation. And I'll just put the letter W there. Just to let it know that we're done. So otherwise then nothing else to see on this build of Whistler. So that just leaves 2267, which is making quite some progress. So we'll just wait for that to finish installing and then we will take a look at that. So it took an almost eternity and finally build 2267 is ready for us. We can see it just says codename Whistler with the old Windows flag. Alright, so for some reason, the Whistler login was taking a long time. It was taking almost an absolute eternity. It felt like it was stuck on. It looked like it was stuck on loading your personal settings, and it didn't look like it wanted to go any further from that. So what I'm doing is I'm booting into a Linux Mint install disk. I'm just waiting for it to fully load up, and I don't think there's a 32-bit version of this. So I'm using the 64-bit variant. I don't think it's ever going to load, maybe because the config we have here is 32-bit and this disk is 64. But not only is there the watercolor theme there in this build from one of the earlier builds of the client version of Whistler 2250, but there is also a action center, like a concept activity center, I guess you could say, which shows recent programs and files, and also quick access links to the internet, email client, and search for files and programs on the system. This, however, would not be implemented in the final release of XP. So that's going to end it here. So in the next episode, we have some more builds of Windows Server 2003 to take a look at as we go up to the release to manufacturing build. So until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.